Welcome to the 2013 General Compliance Training, Maintaining an Ethical Workplace, a Foundation for Excellence. The General Compliance Training highlights the importance of acting with integrity and an overview of the Kindred Compliance Program. In some ways, working at Kindred and in healthcare is the same as working in other industries. No matter where you work, you are expected to conduct your behavior in a way that is legal and ethical and complies with the law. Compliance means conducting your actions within the legal and ethical obligations required of you and of Kindred. Kindred's compliance program is designed to help all employees and contractors conduct business appropriately, help outline how Kindred responds to concerns, and help to detect and prevent fraud. Kindred's compliance program also describes how you should report any concerns you have about improper behavior. Kindred provides care to patients who are covered under the Medicare and Medicaid programs. Because Kindred accepts payments from the Medicare and Medicaid programs, Kindred must follow specific rules regarding how patients are cared for, how services are billed, and how records are kept. We all take responsibility for making sure our patients receive the best care possible. We work ethically, provide high-quality service, and submit claims for payment only when services have been provided. The public and the government place a lot of trust in the healthcare industry to provide patients with only services that are necessary and to bill those services accurately and truthfully. In order to ensure that healthcare companies comply with these obligations, the government has enacted laws to prevent healthcare fraud and abuse. An example of important fraud and abuse laws that apply to Kindred are the False Claims Act, the Anti-Kickback Statute, the Physician Self-Referral Law, the Exclusion Authorities, and the Civil Monetary Penalties Law. In addition, Kindred employees must adhere to the Elder Justice Act. We will discuss these laws and how we comply with them. In addition to the laws designed to prevent healthcare fraud and abuse, we will discuss patient privacy and how you must make sure that patient information is protected from unauthorized use and disclosure. This training is designed to make you aware of laws and regulations that affect how you do your job and how you are responsible for compliance with these laws. As a member of the Kindred team, it is your obligation to comply with Kindred's compliance program and the Code of Conduct. We will discuss the structure of Kindred's compliance program and the obligations that you have to report potential or actual compliance concerns. Kindred has established a corporate compliance program based on the federal sentencing guidelines to monitor our business practices. Kindred has designated a compliance officer and a compliance committee to oversee the compliance program. The compliance officer is responsible for overseeing Kindred's compliance with statutes, rules, regulations, and policies. The compliance committee is an extension of the compliance officer and provides Kindred with increased oversight. Kindred maintains a corporate compliance program through policies and procedures that help prevent fraud, waste, and abuse, enhance operational functions, and improve the quality of health services. Kindred has developed and implemented internal controls and procedures that promote compliance with statutes and regulations of the federal and state healthcare programs and other accrediting or certification entities. It is important for you to be familiar with your division's policies and procedures related to fraud, waste, and abuse. Kindred's Code of Conduct is the foundation of Kindred's compliance program. The Code of Conduct details Kindred's values, provides basic legal principles, and educates employees and contractors on how to respond when you discover practices that you believe may violate the code. Every employee and contractor is responsible for complying with the Code of Conduct. The Code of Conduct is provided to all employees and covered contractors. You are responsible for making sure you have received, read, and will abide by the Code of Conduct. The basic legal principles in the Code of Conduct are the ways in which Kindred employees must act in order to make sure they are complying with the law. Federal law requires employees to refrain from acting in ways that could make someone question whether they have the best interests of a patient in mind when making decisions. Let's look at some of the laws that affect you and how you do your job. The False Claims Act is a federal law that protects the government from being billed for false or fraudulent claims. It is illegal for you to submit claims for payment under Medicare or Medicaid that you know or should know are false or fraudulent. Under the law, to know a claim is false or fraudulent is not just actual knowledge of its falsity. If you look the other way or cover your ears when you suspect false or fraudulent billing, you may be held liable under the False Claims Act. You may also violate the Federal False Claims Act by submitting a claim for payment for a transaction prohibited by the Anti-Kickback Statute or Stark Law. If you document that you provided services to a patient and those services are billed to the government and paid for by the government, but you never actually provided those services to that patient, a false claim has been submitted to the government. Kindred is committed to accurate billing and preventing false claims. If you suspect fraudulent behavior has occurred, you should immediately contact your supervisor, the facility administrator, the support center, or the compliance hotline at 800-359-7412. You may remain anonymous when contacting the compliance hotline. You cannot be retaliated against for reporting your concerns. You have the legal right to file what is called a qui tam lawsuit. If you become aware that Kindred has submitted claims for reimbursement to Medicaid or other government programs in violation of the False Claims Act, in a qui tam lawsuit, an employee or relator files a case alleging a violation of the False Claims Act. If the relator's lawsuit is successful, the relator may collect a portion of the recovery. Kindred will not block any employee from filing a qui tam lawsuit through threats of retaliation or any other means. All employees are encouraged to report and attempt to resolve suspected False Claims Act violations through internal procedures, such as the compliance hotline, prior to filing a lawsuit. You are a vital part of the effort to prevent, detect, and report Medicare non-compliance as well as possible fraud, waste, and abuse. You have a duty to the Medicare program to report any violation of laws that you may be aware of. What is fraud? Fraud is a false statement that is made or submitted with knowledge that the statement is false and could result in some undue benefit. These false statements could be verbal or written. What is waste and abuse? Waste means specific overuse of services or causes of unnecessary costs. Abuse refers to general practices that are inconsistent with sound business, financial, or medical practices that may cause unnecessary costs to the healthcare system. Unlike fraud, the provider has not knowingly and/or intentionally misrepresented facts to obtain payment. Here are some measures you can take to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse. Ensure you coordinate with other payers. Ensure data billing is both accurate and timely. Verify information provided to you. Be on the lookout for suspicious activity. Do not be concerned about whether a suspected practice is fraud, waste, or abuse. Just report any concerns to the Compliance Department or the Compliance Hotline at 800-359-7412. The Compliance Department will investigate all allegations. Everyone has an obligation and is therefore required to report suspected instances of fraud, waste, and abuse. In many other industries, it is customary to reward those who refer business to you. Federal law prohibits healthcare companies like Kindred who receive payments from federal health insurance programs like Medicare and Medicaid from receiving compensation for referrals. Through the Anti-Kickback Statute and the Physician Self-Referral Laws, or Stark Laws, the federal government requires healthcare companies and healthcare employees to refrain from acting in ways that could put into question the motives for any healthcare decision they make. The federal government has identified possible risk areas that you should take into consideration when ensuring you are complying with federal referral laws. These areas of risk include routinely waiving coinsurance or deductible amounts without a good faith determination that the patient is in financial need, offering free goods or goods at below fair market value to induce a referral source to refer patients to your facility, soliciting, accepting, or offering any gift or gratuity of more than nominal value to or from patients, potential referral sources, or anyone else with which Kindred has a business relationship, and soliciting or receiving items of value in exchange for providing a supplier access to patient medical records. The Anti-Kickback Statute imposes criminal and civil monetary penalties on any entity or individual that knowingly and willfully pays, offers to pay, solicits, or receives anything of value for referrals for services payable under federal healthcare programs or for any other business involving any item or service payable under federal healthcare programs. Items of value can take many forms. It is a crime to give or receive or offer to give or receive anything including cash, expensive trips and meals, discounts, concert or sporting event tickets, golf outings, or gift cards in exchange for referrals or business. Violating the anti-kickback statute can result in jail time, fines, and exclusion from participating in federal healthcare programs, including Medicare and Medicaid. These penalties apply to both the giver and the recipient of the prohibited benefits. Let's look at an example. Your best friend is a salesperson who sells braces for orthotics patients. Your friend tells you he will give you a percentage of his commission if you will help him get a contract with your facility. This behavior should not occur, and it is a violation of the Code of Conduct, Kindred policies, and the anti-kickback statute to engage in this behavior. In addition to the anti-kickback statute, the physician self-referral laws, also known as the Stark Law, prohibits a physician from referring Medicaid or Medicare patients for designated health services to an entity with which the physician or any member of the physician's immediate family has a financial relationship. The Stark Law also prohibits the entity from presenting claims for designated health services provided as a result of the prohibited referral. Designated health services include, but are not limited to, clinical lab services, physical therapy services, occupational therapy and speech pathology services, radiology services, home health services, and durable medical equipment. Violating the Stark Law can result in fines and exclusion from participating in federal healthcare programs, including Medicare and Medicaid. In order to prevent any implication that Kindred is violating federal referral laws, Kindred has developed a gift policy that specifies what type of gifts you may give and receive. Kindred policy prohibits employees from accepting from any person or entity any gift or entertainment in any amount that exceeds a nominal value. Employees cannot accept or solicit gifts from patients in exchange for or as a precondition for receiving care or services. Employees may not accept luncheons from vendors in exchange for information on specific products or services. Additionally, gifts that are given to physicians should be tracked on a gift log to ensure that the annual limit is not exceeded. Kindred has developed a gift log that must be used to track gifts given to physicians. The log is available on the Compliance Department website on Connect and should be updated and reviewed on a regular basis. Giving gift cards, cash, or cash equivalents to any external person, such as a physician, case manager, or vendor, for any reason is strictly prohibited. You should contact the Law Department if you have specific questions regarding gifts. Under the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA, Kindred must protect the privacy and security of patient information. This means you are responsible for preventing protected health information, or PHI, from being acquired or accessed by unauthorized individuals. HIPAA allows you only to access minimum necessary protected health information. This means you should only view the patient information you need to do your job. If you are not caring for a patient, or a patient is no longer being treated at Kindred, you probably do not need to access the patient's PHI. Accessing more than the minimum necessary is a HIPAA violation. Many employees use company-owned and personally owned devices, such as smartphones and tablets, to access Kindred's information systems, including Kindred Email. If you use a personal device for Kindred Email, Kindred requires your device to be password protected. In addition, Kindred takes additional measures to secure your Kindred email, including requiring installation of special software to encrypt your Kindred email and allowing Kindred to remotely delete the email in the event your device is lost or stolen. If your personal device is used to access Kindred email, you must promptly contact the compliance hotline at 800-359-7412 if the device is lost or stolen. In order to prevent devices from being lost or stolen, you should take common sense measures to ensure the devices are secure. You should not leave your device unattended in a public area, even if it is just for a moment. You should also keep devices secured when transporting them. Computers and phones should not be left in plain sight in an unattended vehicle. Place the computer in your vehicle's trunk. If your vehicle does not have a trunk, store the computer out of sight. In addition, electronics and patient paperwork should never be left in a vehicle for any period of time or overnight, even if the vehicle is locked. You should be very careful when sending faxes that contain PHI. If you fax PHI to a number on a regular basis, you should pre-program that fax number into the fax machine. Otherwise, you should always double-check the fax number before hitting send. You should always use a Kindred-approved fax cover sheet when faxing PHI, and you should save the fax confirmation page in case there are questions about where a fax was sent. Faxing PHI to the wrong location can be a breach of PHI that requires notice under federal or state law. Text messaging is not a secure communication path and poses significant risks to the security of PHI if transmitted by text. Sending or receiving texts containing PHI is strictly prohibited and is a violation of Kindred policy. If you are being asked to transmit PHI through text messaging, you should refer to Kindred policy. If the individual continues to request that you send PHI by text, tell your facility administrator or contact the compliance hotline at 800-359-7412. Social media is another area where health information is at risk. It is not acceptable to post pictures of patients or post any other patient information on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or any other website where unauthorized individuals could view it. Setting your Facebook profile or Twitter account to private does not mean that you may post patient information. Failure to follow Kindred's policy can lead to HIPAA breaches and may include disciplinary action up to and including separation of employment. When patient information is disclosed in a manner that is not permitted under HIPAA, Kindred may be required to report the disclosure to the state or federal government and to the affected patients. Regardless of how minor you believe a HIPAA violation to be, all HIPAA violations must be reported immediately to the Compliance Department or to the Compliance Hotline at 800-359-7412. Time frames for reporting are very short and must be followed. Some common HIPAA violations are misdialing fax numbers, providing a patient's chart to the wrong person, lost or stolen phones or computers containing PHI, paperwork containing PHI that is lost or stolen from a car or briefcase, being nosy and trying to find out information on patients when you are not authorized to receive the information. As part of the Kindred Compliance Program, special attention should be paid to ensure that our facilities provide a high level of care. Our job is to ensure that our patients receive services to help them achieve the highest possible physical and mental well-being. In order to ensure that quality care is provided, Kindred has developed policies and procedures to guide you through the key components of good patient care. Some particular areas of focus include pain management, pressure ulcer care, proper medication administration, and meeting appropriate dietary needs. These policies serve as guidance for delivering good care and should be reviewed periodically and when the policies change or are updated. An additional quality of care area is abuse prevention. In addition to the policies and procedures that have been established for abuse prevention and recognition, there are other avenues such as the open door policy and the compliance hotline that can be utilized to bring forth potential abuse concerns. It is important to remember that there can be additional state and federal requirements for reporting abuse. For example, the Elder Justice Act requires employees to report instances where there is a reasonable suspicion that a crime has been committed against a person receiving care at Kindred. Check your division's policies and procedures to see whether or not you are required to report such issues and whether this regulation is applicable to your division. The best way to demonstrate good quality of care is through accurate and appropriate documentation in the medical record for each patient. The medical record serves many purposes, and it is important that the information provided in the medical record be truthful for each patient. Nursing documentation, care plans, treatment plans, medication administration records, and treatment records must contain truthful information about the patient's care and condition. The falsification of these records constitutes a federal and state crime. It is important to identify some examples of falsification of records or improper documentation. One example of record falsification would be signing off that you have completed a treatment or given a medication when you have not. Another example would be to indicate that you have provided therapy treatments and improperly recorded the amount of time spent with a patient. It is Kindred's expectation that these kinds of behaviors be immediately reported to the Compliance Department directly. to the compliance hotline at 800-359-7412, or to a manager. It is the manager's responsibility to ensure that the compliance department is notified. It is unacceptable to overlook this kind of wrongdoing. In addition to the potential for fraud with documentation, there is also risk with improper billing. Billing is another area where there is high risk for fraudulent behavior and non-compliance with Kindred policy. The following practices are considered fraudulent and are not acceptable under Kindred policy. Billing for items or services not rendered or provided as claimed. Submitting claims for equipment, medical supplies, and services that are not medically necessary. Duplicating billing. Failing to identify and refund credit balances. Submitting claims to Medicare for patients who are not eligible for coverage. Upcoding the level of service provided. Forging physician or beneficiary signatures. Failing to maintain documentation to establish that services were ordered and performed, and filing false cost reports. Any instances in which the above actions could have occurred or have in fact occurred must be reported to the compliance hotline at 800-359-7412. Retaliation for reporting to the hotline will not be tolerated. Another important part of Kindred's compliance program is employee screening. Kindred is required by federal law to investigate the backgrounds of employees. All Kindred facilities must check the background of potential employees to verify required licenses and certifications are in order. Thorough background investigations and reference checks must be completed on all potential employees. In addition to the required background check and licensing review, all employees are screened to ensure there are no excluded persons working for Kindred. The Office of the Inspector General's list of excluded individuals and the General Service Administration's list of debarred contractors list those individuals and contractors who are not permitted to bill the government for services provided. Additionally, employees are not permitted to work if they have been excluded under any state exclusion lists. Because Kindred accepts payment from federal healthcare programs, Kindred does not permit state or federal excluded individuals or contractors to provide services on Kindred's behalf. As an employee of or contractor for Kindred, you must certify that you have not been convicted of any offense that would preclude you from being employed by a healthcare provider. You must also certify that you have not been excluded from participation in any federal or state healthcare program. If your status changes while you are an employee or a contractor for Kindred, you are required to immediately notify your supervisor or the facility administrator. The Risk Management and Compliance Department performs monthly OIG GSA screens on all current officers, employees, and contracted physicians and entities. Additionally, the Risk Management and Compliance Department performs monthly state exclusion screens. It is the responsibility of the facility to perform state exclusion screens before hire. Information on conducting screens can be found on the Compliance Department website. In order for Kindred's compliance program to be effective, Kindred must make sure that employees are able to communicate their concerns. Your supervisor plays a key role in responding to your concerns, and he or she can serve as your first line of communication. However, sometimes you may not feel comfortable taking your concern to your supervisor. In order to make sure you are able to make your concerns known, Kindred has established a compliance hotline. The hotline is not a substitute for the open door policy, which should be used to express job-related concerns and have them addressed by management. The compliance hotline is designed to be used to report potential or actual violations of laws, regulations, policies, and procedures, or the Code of Conduct. The hotline can be reached at 800-359-7412. The hotline is staffed by an outside vendor and is available to all employees, vendors, patients, and family members 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Those calling the hotline may choose to remain anonymous, and the call is not recorded. If you wish to remain anonymous, the Compliance Department will take all available measures to ensure that your anonymity is protected. Calls to the hotline are documented and investigated promptly. Kindred policy prohibits retaliation against anyone for filing a good faith complaint or concern with the compliance hotline. Any supervisor, manager, or employee who conducts or condones retribution, retaliation, or harassment of an employee who contacts the hotline will be subject to disciplinary action, up to and including separation of employment. Individuals who intentionally misuse the compliance hotline may also be subject to disciplinary action, up to and including separation of employment. For Kindred's compliance program to be effective, Kindred conducts ongoing monitoring and evaluation of the program. One effective tool to assess the compliance program is performing regular, periodic compliance audits by members of the Risk and Compliance Department, other Kindred departments, or external experts. These audits focus on day-to-day operations, as well as how well Kindred is complying with rules governing claims development, billing, and cost reports, compliance with Medicare and Medicaid requirements, and other key components of the Kindred compliance program. Kindred's auditing and monitoring consists of on-site visits to facilities, testing the billing and claims reimbursement staff on its knowledge of program requirements and claims and billing criteria, reviewing medical records to ensure support of medical necessity, examining the complaint and grievance logs and investigative files, reviewing past surveys to determine if follow-up actions have been completed, checking personnel records to determine whether previously disciplined staff members are now conforming to policy, validation of licensure and certification of appropriate staff, and analyzing past survey reports for patterns of deficiencies. In order for Kindred's compliance program to be successful, you must take an active role in following Kindred policy and the Code of Conduct. Part of your annual evaluation is whether or not you have been compliant with different aspects of Kindred's compliance program. Failing to know Kindred policy can result in serious consequences ranging from verbal warnings to suspension to separation of employment. In addition to disciplinary action by Kindred, failure to follow Kindred policy may lead to violations of state or federal laws. The False Claims Act, the Anti-Kickback Statute, and the Physician Self-Referral Law all carry stiff penalties for violators. In some cases, you may also be subject to jail time and exclusion from the Medicare and Medicaid programs. In conclusion, Kindred's compliance program has developed and implemented internal controls and procedures that promote compliance with statutes and regulations of the federal healthcare programs, including the Anti-Kickback Statute, Stark Law, and False Claims Act. You are responsible for following Kindred's Code of Conduct and knowing your division's policies regarding billing, referrals, and abuse reporting. You are also responsible for taking appropriate steps to make sure protected health information is kept private. Protected health information should not be shared with any unauthorized persons. Any potential violation of Kindred's Code of Conduct or policy and procedure should be reported to the Compliance Hotline at 800-359-7412. You may remain anonymous if you do not wish to identify yourself, and you will not be retaliated against for filing a report. You are important to Kindred's compliance efforts. If you have questions, please ask your supervisor or contact a compliance department representative.